This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm HORDE, and it's Friday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance and Magic's highest level of competition. Over the years, I've looked at a lot of different color identities in this series. In fact, I've looked at every single 2 and 3 color combination except for Mardu, and we're completing the cycle today with a look at the cards that have that color identity. Mardu is the name for the Tarkir Khan that occupies the red, white, and black shard. And ever since the release of Khans of Tarkir, people use Mardu to refer to any card with that kind of identity. To be eligible for this list, a card had to have one of those Mardu identities, and that means that the red, white, and black mana symbols all have to appear somewhere on the card with no other colored mana symbols appearing. This means that cards that simply cost all 3 of those colors have a Mardu identity, but so does a card that is black but has a red and white ability in the text box. In all, there are 42 cards with the Mardu identity, and in this video we'll take a look at the ones that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours and Set Championships. A second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, and this includes events like Grand Prix and Magic Online challenges. Alright, let's get to the list. At number 10, it's Mardu Ascendancy. In Khans of Tarkir, each of the factions got a rare Ascendancy that was an enchantment, and obviously this is Mardu's version of that. This Ascendancy gives you an extra attacking goblin anytime you attack your opponent with a non-token, and you can also sacrifice it to buff the toughness of your entire board. It gained its only points in the Standard of 2014, where it was, unsurprisingly, played in a Mardu aggro deck. It hasn't gained any points since rotating. At number 9, it is Brutal HORDECHIEF. In Fate Reforged, each of the Tarkir factions got a mythic rare monocolored creature with a hybrid costed ability, and that's what Brutal HORDECHIEF is for Mardu. He gives you Hill Giant stats, but makes up for that with some great effects in the text box. Each creature you attack your opponent with drains a life from your opponent, and the Boros hybrid costed ability is pretty wacky. It makes your opponent's creatures block your stuff, and you get to control how they block, which can really wreck your opponent in some situations. The HORDECHIEF gained its 2 points in Standard in 2015. One came in a Rakdos aggro deck, and the other in an Orzhov aggro deck. It hasn't been played at all since rotating out of Standard. At number 8, it is Hide and Seek. This split card from Dissension has a Mardu identity because Hide costs Boros mana and Seek costs Orzhov mana. This card has a design similar to many split cards. In particular, both sides are fairly situational, but can be powerful when the situation does happen. Hide lets you tuck away an artifact or enchantment, and Seek lets you take a card out of your opponent's library and gain life equal to the mana value of the card you exile. It has gained all of its points in Modern, where it's appeared as a sideboard card in Red Deck Wins, and more recently, Blue-Black Mill. It makes a pretty nice sideboard card because its 2 sides sort of let it fill more than one slot. Sometimes you want Hide against decks with lots of targets for it, and sometimes you also want Seek, like against decks that are really reliant on a single copy of a card in their deck. It has gained points as recently as 2021, and it always has an outside shot at showing up in modern sideboards. At number 7, it is Extus, Auric Overlord. It has the same exact score as Hide and Seek, but I gave it the higher slot on the list because its average finish is higher. Extus is a modal double-faced card, and that means you can just choose which side of it you want to cast. It has a Mardu identity because Extus is Orzhov, while Awaken the Blood avatar is Rakdos. Both sides here are quite powerful. Extus gives you a 4-mana 2/4 with Double Strike, and his Magecraft ability lets you return a non-legendary creature from your graveyard to your hand anytime you cast an instant or sorcery. Awaken the Blood avatar is less good if you just shove it into any deck, because it has a huge mana cost, but you can reduce it by sacrificing creatures. And what you get out of it is a 3/6 creature token that edicts your opponent and does 3 to your opponent every time it attacks. It's gained all of its points in Standard Rakdos aggro decks that have a lot of good fodder to sacrifice to the Rise of Extus side, like various creature tokens, Eye Twitch, and Serrated Scorpions. Those decks do also run white mana and can cast the Extus side if they want to, but it can frequently get more value out of sacrificing a bunch of stuff to get the Avatar token. Extus is still in Standard and has a chance at gaining more points, but it doesn't have any since the first half of 2021. At number 6, it is Queen Marchesa. She was printed in Conspiracy Take the Crown, a set that's only legal in the Eternal formats. When she enters the battlefield, she makes you into the monarch. a special designation that lets you draw an additional card during your instep. That status can be taken away by your opponent doing combat damage to you, in which case they become the monarch and it can just keep going back and forth. In most cases, that means the turn you play Marchesa, you're going to get to draw an extra card at the end of your turn. She also comes with Death Touch and Haste, and gives you an additional Monarch payoff. You get a 1/1 Assassin with Death Touch and Haste every upkeep if you're the Monarch. That's a ton of value, so much so that she actually sees play in Legacy, where she's gained all of her points in 4-color Life from the Loam decks. She's primarily played as a sideboard card that you can bring in against decks that don't run much interaction, like other Loam decks, since she obviously very quickly snowballs and gives you control of the game. She has a decent shot at gaining more points going forward. At number 5, it is Mardu Charm. Most factions in Magic end up with a charm at some point, and there are always instances that come with a choice between 3 abilities. Like with most modal cards, each individual option isn't the best deal, but the modality is pretty powerful. The charm can do 4 damage to a creature, make you 2/1/1 tokens with First Strike, or allow you to make your opponent discard their best non-creature, non-land card. Obviously, the removal option is the one that is chosen the most frequently because it comes up the most, but sometimes having the ability to make a couple of bodies at instant speed or disrupt an opponent is what you want. It gained all of its points in Standard in 2015, where it was played in both Mardu Control and mid-range decks. It hasn't gained any points since rotating out of Standard. At number 4, it is Ruinous Ultimatum. This card is from Ikoria, a set that, like Tarkir, was about the wedge color combinations. In that set, each wedge got an ultimatum, and, like the shard ultimatums that came much earlier, they're all sort of tricky to cast, but have insane effects. And that's certainly what you get here, since you get a one-sided board wipe that hits all of your opponent's non-land permanents. Most of the time, that just means you win the game when you cast it. In Standard and Pioneer, it was played in Fires of Invention decks, where its challenging mana cost was less of an issue, since Fires let you cast it without actually paying the mana. Fires of Invention was eventually banned in Standard, and since then it hasn't gained any points. At number 3, it is Smiting Helix. This card's a fun reference to Lightning Helix. When cast normally, it has the same effect as the Helix, but for 3 generic and a black. But you can also flash it back for the same cost as the original Lightning Helix. This means you get 2 Lightning Helixes out of a single card, and that's pretty nice. That effect can kill a lot of creatures while gaining you life, and it can even go after the opponent. Smiting Helix was printed in Modern Horizons, and that means it skipped legality in formats like Standard and Pioneer, but that's okay, because it's gained all of its points in Modern, where it's played in Dredge decks. Modern Dredge, of course, seeks to mill a bunch of its library, including Creeping Chills and Smiting Helixes. Those cards can do lethal to your opponent on their own over the course of the game, while also helping you survive long enough to keep on milling. Modern Dredge decks also tend to run creatures, of course, so they can treat the Creeping Chills and Smiting Helixes as finishers. They're not the only source of damage the deck has. Either way, Smiting Helix is going to keep on gaining points in Modern. At number 2, it is Butcher of the Horde. This big scary demon is a 4-mana 5/4 with flying, and it can also eat creatures to gain Vigilance, Lifelink, or Haste. Those are some scary keywords for such an imposing flyer to gain. He was one of the primary win conditions in Mardu midrange and control decks in Standard. That deck had plenty of fodder for the Butcher to sacrifice too, because it ran things like Goblin Rabblemaster and Hordeling Outburst. It hasn't gained any points since rotating out of Standard. And at number 1, it's Crackling Doom. This is an instant speed edict effect that also shocks the opponent. It is a lot better than your typical edict because it gives your opponent much less control over what is sacrificed. They have to sacrifice the creature that has the highest power, and that's typically, though not always, going to be their best creature. That's some great value for the mana. It was played in all the standard varieties of Mardu, including aggro, control, and midrange, and it was even played outside of Mardu decks, as that standard format had mana that was way too good, so a deck that was Jeskai midrange was also capable of casting Crackling Doom. It has also gained some points in Mardu Pyromancer decks in Modern, which are spell decks running payoffs like Young Pyromancer, so the deck can get some additional value out of a card like Crackling Doom. That said, it hasn't gained any points since 2018. Most of the other cards on this list are also inactive or close to it though, and it has a sizable lead, so it can probably hold on to this spot going forward. So, those are the 10 Mardu cards that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you want to own any of them, you can find direct Card Kingdom links for each of them in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future episodes of this series and a whole lot of other Magic content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past videos in this series, including others that look at various color combinations, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, you can on Patreon. Thanks for watching.